Okay, I'm going to talk about my grandparents. What were my grandparents like? What were they? But they were. I don't know how to explain it, but I'll try to do the best I can. Give you a little background of them that I know of that I can remember. My uncle, my mother's side, which would be my Grandpa Stasenka. His first name was Joe. Don't know his last name. But at one time, I'd say before the crash came in the 20s there, he was a millionaire. He made his fortune building cigar boxes for all the cigar manufacturers and practically in all the United States. He was the largest manufacturer of boxes. I can't remember the name of it. It was like American Box or U.S. Box or Chicago Box Company. One of those three names. I can't remember exactly what it was. What he called this, and maybe it was all three of them. I don't know, but it was a large plant. Covered one square block. It was a 5-story building. It was huge for that time. In the late 1800s, and he did quite well. But, excuse me, just for a second. I got to blow my nose. He did quite well. A lot of cigar manufacturers would come to him and say, "I want you to make me a box." So he would make it, design it, and he would get the copyrights on the design of the box. So like White Owl, and I don't remember what all of them. He told me once what all his that he had copyrights on, but I think White Owl was one, and Dutch Masters was another. So if these companies wanted to go out and get another box company, well, he owned the copyrights for their actually their brand. So he made out quite well. He like I say, he lost it all in he tried to get into bank business. And I guess somebody talked him into going into the bank business, and that he'd make a lot of money. Well, what happened was when he went in the bank business, the banks failed, and he had a lot of people that had money in his banks. So he went out and sold his company, sold everything everything he had. The only thing he kept was a 2-flat in the west side of Chicago and a car. Everything else he sold off and paid off as many of the people who had money in his bank as possible. He had a good attitude. His attitude was the God give it and God take it away, and he said that's just part of life. Now he started to come back. He started a small little box business again. He started in just a small little shop. And he started making cigar boxes for these men that would make custom-made cigars. The hand-rolled, really customized cigars. And he started making boxes for them. And he came up with an idea about cigarettes. A lot of the cigarettes people. A lot of people were smoking now cigarettes instead of cigars. So he's like, I'm going to try to do something. So he designed a box, a little cigarette box case, or whatever you want to call it, because he learned how to print. He and another fellow designed a way how to print on tin. So the boxes were probably 6 inches square and about maybe a quarter an inch thick, and there was like 20 cigarettes in them. And he made these boxes for Lucky's and what was it, Chesterfields and Camels, and really they're well-known brands at that particular time. And then, lo and behold, the war broke out, and he couldn't get tin. So they started making the cigarettes company started making their boxes out of cardboard or paper boxes. And so my grandfather was out of that, and then as the war came more and more, he couldn't get redwood out of California to build his boxes, and slowly but surely, he finally ended up where he just got out of business and said that's it. He's not going to do it anymore. He had a very nice, in his heyday, he had a big factory. They had all automated machines. He was, he was quite a success. He was a short man, had always had a mustache, wore high-top shoes because he said that's better for your ankles. And when he'd go out, he'd put spats on. So he was a dapper, and always smoked cigars. And he passed away and he liked his beer too. He passed away when he was 85. Yeah, I remember he used to brew beer in the basement when I was a kid. And then he always make some root beer for the kids, and he'd brew a keg of root beer and 15 kegs of beer for the grown-ups. But that's what he did. Now his wife, who lived at that time in the two flats, my folks lived in the upstairs, and my grandpa and grandma lived in the downstairs. Now her name was Mary, and I don't remember her maiden name. I think it was Crida, but I don't really know it. I don't know. I'm trying to think of what her maiden name was, but I just can't think of it now. Well, anyway. But her first name was Mary. No, her first name was Catherine. That's why my sister is named Catherine after my grandma. So, and she was a war bride. Well, not a war bride. What would they call that? There was a name for what my grandfather did. He wrote back to Czechoslovakia and said, "Send me a woman that wants to get married." And they send them my grandma, and they got married. My grandfather was married the first time, and he had two children with his first wife, and then the two children were raised then by his wife's grandmother. She wanted to raise the kids, and my grandfather says, well, he had business to run and all that, so he gave the kids to his mother-in-law to raise. But then he wanted his own wife, so then he got a male bride, or male, I forget what they call those. But anyway, a male bride. Well, it'll come to me. So anyway, so he wrote to Czechoslovakia, and they sent him a wife, and they courted for, my grandmother said, 2 months. And they decided to get married, and they did. And then they had 5 kids, I believe. My mother, my Auntie Helen, my Auntie Marie, my Auntie Lucille, and Ted, the only boy. So he had 5 kids then with my grandma. And like I say, they lived, a fairly, good life. My grandfather was probably 12 14 years older than my grandma, but he lived 85. She had a stroke and died, I think, in her 70s. I don't remember exactly when she died, but that's what it was. Now, Grandpa Simek had a interesting life. He came to the United States on a ship. He was a carpenter or a mill worker, or he worked with his hands with wood. He was in the old country. He said he was a furniture finisher. So if you had a piece of furniture that needed to be refinished or needed to be finished, period, that's what he would do. So he got maybe he did stuff like that aboard the old wooden ships when he came. Landed in New York and hopped on a train and went from New York all the way to San Francisco, stopping at a lot of larger cities just to see what they were like, and then continued on his trip. He got to San Francisco, and they were talking about the best place to live was Australia. So he caught a ship and went to Australia, and got off in Sydney, and he said that was the most godforsaken place he ever was. He said he was in there was better cities in the United States than there was at that time in Australia. So he got back on the ship and went back to the States, took a train, and decided on Chicago to settle. Well, as he was going, he caught word that there was, if you would volunteer for the Spanish-American War, that you would get after the war they would give automatic citizenships. So he went and enlisted and became he volunteered and served in the Spanish-American War, got his citizenship, and then when he did that, he could get my grandmother over here from Czechoslovakia, that time Bohemia. So that's what they did. He got her, send her money, and she came over, and he knew her, I guess, the way I was told. He knew her in Czechoslovakia, and so that's how he got her here. Now, he tried to work in his profession, and the stuff that he used, the chemicals, were eating his hands away, and his hands were in very bad shape. So he decided to do some work with glass, because he also did that a little bit when he was in Europe, and started a glass business. They were again using harsh chemicals to do a lot of etchings and stuff like that. And his hands weren't getting any better, so he was told to quit. So he became a streetcar conductor. And he would get on the streetcar in Cicero and take it all the way downtown and all the way back, and that was kind of like his route. And I remember when I was a little kid, a lot of times I would go to see my grandma, and I'd hop on one of the streetcars, and there'd be my grandpa collecting money. And, he was a good old guy. He was nice. Liked his beer. Raised 13 kids. I mean, that was a chore in any man's life, but he did it, and I think the kids had a good. My dad thought his life wasn't bad when he was a kid growing up. So, and that's what it was. His wife. Oh, his first name was John. So that's why my two middle names are Joseph John, because of my two grandpas. So I'm William after my dad, then Joseph after my mom's, and John after my dad's. So that's how I got my name of William Joseph John Simek. Now let's see, my grandma, her first name was Mary, and her maiden name was Buckhoffner. I don't know why that name seems to stick in my mind, but that was her maiden name, was Buckhoffner, which is basically a German name, but they were never, my grandparents never would consider themselves being German or even Czech. They were always Bohemians. That's what we were. They were Bohemians. We weren't. Mostly now, I guess all the Bohemians were were taken over by Czechoslovakia. But at the time, Bohemia covered parts of Germany and parts of Austria. It was a large country at one time that was all cut up. Let's see, her name was Mary, and that woman would. That's all I remember her doing is cooking and working, and a very generous lady. I mean, where my grandparents lived there was a big train yard, and there'd be a lot of hobos and bums would take it to go into Chicago. Would take the trains there and then get off in the yards there and come into the city and look around. And well, my grandmother used to feed them. I don't know. They got to know. The bums got to know that if you wanted a good meal, there was this house in Cicero that would feed you. So the guys would come in. My grandma's always had a dog, so nobody ever goofed around with her because this dog it was a Spitz, and he loved my grandma. He'd have killed anybody that touched her. My grandfather once says, he says, I'd never hit your grandma. He says, otherwise the dog would kill me. So, I mean, the dog was there, and he would patrol it, and my grandmother would feed these people. So she was a very generous person. And I can remember growing up as a kid, on Sunday night, they'd all go over. We'd all go over to Grandma Simek's, and all my dad's brothers and sisters would be there, and they would talk, and sometimes have dinner, sometimes not. It just depends on what Grandma wanted to do, I guess, at that time. So that's a little background of my grandparents. They, at least how long I can remember. It's pretty hard for me to remember things. I think my next one will be my uncles and aunts, what I can remember about each one of those. Maybe some of my cousins, but that'll be something I'll have to think about, and because I know there's a lot of stories that could be told about that I can remember about my aunts and uncles, but I can't think of any right now. But when I do, I'll have a segment on what I can remember about my aunts and uncles.